Welcome to another edition of Catchup with the Clergy. A few weeks ago, I told you about the stained glass windows that were in the St. Michael of the Saints Chapel. Today I'm going to talk to you about the people who are in the stained glass window that's high above the altar. It's the risen Christ window, but we also call it the modern day saints window. So we'll start, and I'll tell you who each of the figures is and a little bit about them. As we start on the upper right-hand side, in brown is St. Thomas the Apostle. At the time that we were naming our new parish, St. Thomas the Apostle was one of the 8 possible choices. He was a favorite, especially among our young people, and perhaps he is a favorite because he reminds us of our own humanity. St. Thomas is best known as the one who doubted Christ's resurrection, but came to believe after touching the risen Lord's hands and feet. Now, just below St. Thomas is a real modern-day saint, Saint Pope John the 23rd. John the 23rd was the favorite pope of our then pastor, Father Conrad Kratz. By convening the Second Vatican Council, John the 23rd opened the Roman Catholic Church to the modern world, in theology and the governance of the church, in improved relations with other Christian and non-Christian religious groups, and in the sacred liturgy, especially the use of the vernacular. He was canonized with St. John Paul II in 2014. Just below St. John the 23rd is Joseph Cardinal Bernardin. Cardinal Bernardin of Chicago was a man who inspired many priests, religious, and the laity by the way he led as bishop, teacher, friend, and brother. In 1982, he became Archbishop of Chicago and then was elevated to cardinal. But perhaps the forgiveness of a young man who brought a false charge against him gained him respect, support, and affection of all. Cardinal Bernardin died at his residence on November 13th in 1996. The lady in white with a little blue trim is Saint Mother Teresa. She was the founder of the Order of Missionaries of Charity, who were dedicated to the very poor, especially the destitute. It didn't matter whether they were dying from AIDS, leprosy, malnutrition, or cancer. She wanted them to die in peace and dignity. And for over 50 years, she reminded us of the biblical truth that a disease is not a judgment from God. At the age of 87, Mother Teresa died at her convent on September 8th of 1997. She was canonized in September of 2016. Just below Mother Teresa, also in white with a blue shawl around his shoulders, is St. Michael of the Saints. He is the one who our daily chapel is named after. His generous service to the poor, the unfortunate, and the sick made him a compassionate priest and a faithful friend. After 11 days of prayer, Frances Sands was cured through his intercession. The cancerous tumors on her lip and tongue disappeared. There were no scars. Pope Pius IX canonized Michael on June 8th of 1862. Over to the left, in brown with a ponytail and a thing around her head, is Saint Kateri Tekakwitha. Kateri Tekakwitha was born in a town in New York in the year of 1656. Her mother was a Christian Algonquin, and her father was a Mohawk chief. When Tekakwitha was 4 years old, her parents and a younger brother died of an epidemic of smallpox. The disease also attacked her, leaving her face scarred and her eyesight impaired. After being exposed to Christianity and studying the life of Jesus, Kateri became a Christian and was baptized on Easter Sunday in 1676. And The last thing that she said, and I'm not going to pronounce what it was in her Indian language, but what it meant was, "Jesus, I love you." And at the moment of her death, she was surrounded by 2 Jesuit priests and as many of her tribe as could fit in the room. 15 minutes after her death, in the presence of all these witnesses, the scars on her face from the smallpox miraculously disappeared. She was canonized a saint in 2012. Just to the left of her, in white, is Dorothy Day, known as the uncanonized saint of the homeless. In 1933, she founded the Catholic Worker Movement, which started as a newspaper, but eventually came to include Catholic worker houses of hospitality for the poor and the homeless. In 2000, Pope John Paul II allowed the Diocese of New York to open the cause for canonization. She now holds the title Servant of God. Just to her right, in green, is Blessed Katharine Drexel. From an early age, she was deeply devoted to the love of God and neighbor, as was her famous family. She was born to a wealthy family in Philadelphia. A turning point in her life was a trip to Rome, where she met with the Pope and told him he needed to establish a missionary order for the poor back in the States. The Pope challenged her to start one herself and assured her of his support. Using her own personal wealth, Katharine Drexel founded the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament for Indians and colored people. Her name was also among the 8 possible choices for naming of our parish. And canonized in 2000, her feast day is March the 3rd. In yellow, just above her, and is Sister Thea Bowman. Sister Thea Bowman, a Franciscan sister of perpetual adoration. Her grandfather was a slave, her father was a physician, and her mother was a teacher. Prompted by the Holy Spirit, Sister Thea used her many talents to help people better understand their unconscious racist attitudes. She preached education instead of prejudice. She also has the title Servant of God. Just above Thea in white, representing the women of De Pere. The figure who stands as a representative of all these women is based on the life and death of Mary Beth Van Dyke Van Hefty. She was a young woman of 37 when she died of cancer, leaving behind a husband and 4 young children. Her witness of faith throughout her life, and especially as she faced her death, is remarkable. In letters written to friends and families, which really are epistles of faith, she challenged all of us to see faith as a gift that dares the soul. 10 days before she died, Mary Beth and Jim composed letters for the kids. Letters for some of the important occasions in their life when they may need a reminder of mom's love and presence. For example, significant birthdays, high school graduations, wedding days, and unforeseen days when each simply needed a hug from mom. She holds in her hands the boxes that these letters and notes were put in. And finally, on the upper left, the bald-headed gentleman represents the laborers of De Pere. Our church was built by very dedicated workers who saw in this building a real labor of love. Much of the work was done by family companies who are members of the parish and who were extraordinarily generous in giving of their time, talent, and material. But of course, the main feature of our window is the risen Christ, in whom all of us put our trust and our hope. See you again next time. Catch up with the clergy.